Okay, I'm Brian Tramont. Graduated from Parkway South in 1986. Prior to that, I attended South Junior High when it was part of the senior high. So I went 7 through 12 at Parkway South, and prior to that at Sorrento Springs School for my grade school career in Parkway. So I guess 15 years of Parkway education. Right now, I'm the Chief of Staff of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the agency, so I have responsibility for the budget, which is about $360 million and about 2,000 employees spread out around the country between our main offices in Washington, but we also have a laboratory in Maryland, a call processing center in Pennsylvania, about 16 field offices around the country. In addition, I supervise the general policy and political functions of the agency, so everything from your cell phone to cable television. Howard Stern, Janet Jackson are perhaps the most famous areas that we spend our time lately, but also things like local number portability, your ability to take your telephone number with you when you change cell phone providers. We promulgated those rules. The do not call list, which is very popular among American consumers, yes, very, very well received by all, and similar consumer initiatives also fall underneath our purview. So we have a broad reach of responsibilities across a lot of areas that touch Americans' lives in very fundamental ways, which makes it a great place to work. I've been there for about 5 years. Prior to this job, I served as Chief of Staff to 2 other FCC commissioners, and then before that, I was at a law firm for about 5 years. My job is political in the sense that if the election had gone the other way, I would have been out of a job come January. But most of the day-to-day work of the agency is fairly nonpartisan. We tend to focus on common answers to often very technical problems, but really with one fundamental goal, which is to try and deliver the maximum number of services to the maximum number of Americans at the lowest price with greatest innovation and investment that drives the economy and education and healthcare and things like that, with using those technologies most efficiently to advance the common good. So it's a great opportunity for me. Parkway obviously is a fundamental portion of who I am. Having spent the number of years I did in Parkway schools, I was very lucky to have so many fantastic faculty members and administrators who dedicated themselves to helping me become a better person, and at considerable personal sacrifice and patience and understanding that those faculty members brought to the equation. And they exposed me to so many fantastic intellectual challenges and also helped to shape, I think, my core character, and that is the things that I hold to be so important. For example, while I was at Parkway South, we were very active on the community service side, doing lots of community service programs, both in terms of volunteering for the homeless, but also things within the school, student council, what have you. I think that's been something that's touched every component of my life since. I volunteered, took a year off from school and volunteered at a service organization called Youth Service America that encourages young people to become involved in community service work. I served on their board for a number of years afterwards. I mentored a young man in Washington, D.C. for about 7 years, from ages 4 to 11. I founded an organization within the FCC called FCC Best, which is dedicated to the idea that too many federal agencies come into work every day and then they leave at the end of the day and they never get involved in the neighborhood and the people around how we do our jobs. And so this program is integrating us with area schools and community centers to try and bridge that gap a little bit. So it's donating school supplies and books, reading programs, educational opportunities for them, bringing them in for tours, really trying to give back to the community of which we're such an important part. So I think that a lot of those values were things that were shaped by the Parkway experience. I also think the importance of the teachers that I had during my tenure really, for me, made it very important to me that I have an opportunity to teach, because they had such an important role in my life. I really yearned to have a similarly important role to other people in other people's lives. So I've taught summer school even while I was in college, and now I'm on the faculty at a law school in Washington, D.C., and I have been for a number of years, as well as doing tutoring and coming back and things like that. So the education and the values that Parkway was so important in forming in me really have shaped who I've become in a lot of different ways. One particularly, I think, life-shaping experience for me in my high school, or in my Parkway education, occurred when I was in grade school. We had a policy at Sorrento Springs that we weren't allowed to talk in the lunchroom. And this was not well received by the students, as you might imagine. And being a good civic student at the time, I was very familiar with the right to petition. So I began a petition drive to stop the policy of us not being able to speak in the lunchroom. And things progressed over a period of time, and eventually I got the message back that the student petition was not going to be sufficient to change the policy. So I decided that we needed to expand to include parents in the petition drive. And my father was a printer and part of a printing company, and used to have the old mimeograph machine. So I hand wrote little letters that we sent home to all with all the students to their parents to sign the petition. A few hundred parents did sign that petition. Ultimately, the process concluded with a big school-wide meeting with the superintendent that ultimately resulted in the principal coming home with my parents that night and apologizing for standing in the way and ultimately changing the policy. And I think that taught me a couple really important lessons about how to bring about change. One is that, working within the system does work, and I followed the rules, and I had a fairly specific and straightforward way of applying it. And I think that working within the system, I think that made me inherently trust the system maybe in ways that other people might not. The second thing was, I think that just giving that hard work pays off, that the fact if you have a cause that is just and you invest a lot of energy into it, that ultimately you will prevail. And I think that was a very important thing in shaping my approach to public policy going forward. So that experience, looking back on it, although I surely didn't appreciate it at the time and probably didn't appreciate it until within the last decade, really influenced how I approach politics and public policy. And I'm very thankful that I had it, and I'm very thankful of the leadership of the school and the teachers that I had at the time and my parents, all of whom sort of led an extraordinary process run through to what I view to be an appropriate conclusion. I was very lucky to have had that experience at that age because it really did shape who I am and how passionate I feel about the things I try and do. In addition to my responsibilities at work, I'm active in the Federal Communications Bar Association. I serve on their executive committee. They are a professional organization devoted not only to continuing education for lawyers, but also have a community service component, which is very important to me. As I mentioned earlier, I'm on the faculty at Catholic University Law School. They have a practicing law institute where I'm an adjunct faculty member. And I do, I'm in a book club, and I do those things that are lifelong learning kind of things to make sure that I stay relatively well-rounded. Another thing that Parkway gave me is a commitment to athletics. So I continue to be a runner as I was in high school and continue to do that on a fairly regular basis. So there certainly is something special about being from St. Louis and something special about being a member of the Parkway community that does transcend the normal where are you from and what do you do kind of stories. I have Parkway alumni that I work with every day in Washington at the Federal Communications Commission. I run across people as I travel around the country doing speeches and the like. I run into people consistently from this part of the country and who are proud Parkway alums. So it's really extraordinary that network has remained so intact, as well as the lifelong friendships that you form, of course, during your educational opportunities. So I still obviously am in contact with many friends from Parkway South and even from my Sorrento Springs days, as well as with many faculty members. I've been very lucky that so many of them have taken a lifelong interest in being involved in my life, and a number of teachers attended my law school graduation from Yale, and Judy Wood from my 8th grade teacher and my Parkway South cross-country coach and what have you. Those are people that I still see when I come home. And it's that sort of, I think it's very important, particularly at a public policy job, that you maintain your grounding with who you are and what those values are. And so Washington sometimes can make people lose their moorings a little bit, and I think it's very important to try and maintain those contacts. And it's important that I remember who I was and what I came from, and if I need to get a little kick in the tuchus every once in a while, sometimes those are the ideal people to give it to me because they've been doing it for 15 or 20 years, so I'm very lucky that way. Well, for all Americans, young people, I think the most important thing is to just not to readily accept limitations on who you can become. And regardless of whether of your gender or your sexual orientation or your religion or your economic background or your appearance, I think it's important that you identify what you think you want to be when you grow up, for lack of a better term. And then you really single-mindedly focus on that and not accept the answer that somehow you can't. Too often, I think people allow others to limit who they become, and I think that's a very dangerous thing. I think people really need to focus on what they think their value structure and their talents lead them naturally to, and really don't take no for an answer. Just keep pounding away at that goal. And if for some reason people try and stop you, just keep after it. I think that's the most important thing.